food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, but today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
we are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems, because together
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. My name is Ishmael Sunga. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions based in Pretoria. I'm happy and pleased and honored to be your moderator today. And welcome once more to today's Producer Public Forum. As some of you might be aware, this is the third in a series and the last, which began a couple of days ago. Great to have you all. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to the following logistics issues. Firstly, participants are welcome to introduce themselves in the chat box, given that due to the large number of attendees, this event is not set up as a meeting, but it is in the form of a webinar. Secondly, we kindly ask you to post your questions in the Q&A, where all panelists and attendees can see them. We will be monitoring the section and we'll do our best to answer these questions in the Q&A box and at the end of the presentations. Thirdly, because of limited capacity, we can only take questions that are posted in English in the Q&A. And please direct your questions to specific people or persons if you're able to. Fourthly, we will also try to answer some of these questions verbally. Fifthly, where we are not able to answer questions on the moment or in the Q&A box, we will follow up in the next weeks with a note to all attendees. Finally, please note that all the presenters speak English and that the verbal part of the forum is being interpreted in 2 different languages. We have an interesting lineup, a good agenda. You have a brief agenda that has been sent to those that have registered, but quite quickly, let me just highlight that we will start by welcome address from the Special Envoy, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. And then we get on to producer representative presentations. We then move on to what are called the action tracks presentations, followed by moderated discussions on the action tracks. And then we have an update on the summit dialogues. We move on to a moderated discussion on the summit dialogues for clarity and further information. Another moderated discussion. Finally, there will be an open feedback and Q&A before we wrap up. We plan to wrap up exactly at 12:30 according to the time. Without further ado, I want to call upon Dr. Agnes Kalibata to please present her opening remarks. She, I suppose, needs no introduction, but let me just highlight that she is the UN Special Envoy on the Food Systems Summit. Apart and amongst some of her prestigious roles, she is also the president of AGRA, has served in the Ministry of Agriculture in Rwanda, and has had several awards internationally, an acclaimed researcher, acclaimed agriculturalist, and an acclaimed supporter of rural development. Over to you, Dr. Kalibata, for your address. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ismail, and it's good to see you all here today. It's a huge honor and opportunity to be joining the producers' meetings that you all have been having, the dialogues you've been having. We set out this food systems dialogue mostly because of moments like this, moments where we get to hear from everybody. But for me, of course, moments where we get to hear from producers, the people that sit at the place where the rubber meets the road, the people that live food systems every day, the producers. So this idea of giving people a voice, this idea of making the Food Systems Summit a people's summit is really what this moment is about. So let's use the opportunity to be able to bring out the voices of farmers. Let's use the opportunity to be able to bring the voices of fishers, livestock people, all the people that are in this landscape that is impacted by food systems. I want to make sure that I bring out a few points. That our livelihoods is really about farmers. 740 million people are farming. We know very well that 2/3 of these are farmers, but they are not the people that are gaining the most or benefiting the most from what is happening in our world, of food systems. In fact, we know that a significant proportion of them is suffering from malnutrition, is not having enough, and is living in poverty. And I think that's what we should be talking about today, the fact that it's just not acceptable to be having producers as people that are struggling. But we also know that they present a huge opportunity for our food systems. The 740 million people that are farming are producing, who are smallholder farmers, are producing 80% of the food that we use in our homes. They're in charge of 80% of our landscapes. They have a huge role when it comes to protecting our lands and our landscapes. They are the best stewards we have. Can we talk about how we empower them to be better stewards than they can afford to be them by themselves today? So this conversation must be about how we support farmers and producers to be better stewards of the landscapes they have so that they can give us more, while at the same time giving our planet more. I also want to make sure that we address some of the challenges that they have lived with for basically forever. The living wage challenge is something that we cannot keep pushing away. The opportunities for jobs for their children as they get out of the farming landscape and start being part of the world that doesn't present many opportunities for young people. How do we deal with these challenges? How do we give them opportunities that many of us are taking for granted? And yet we live in the same world. The needs we have are the very needs that they have too. How do we ensure that they do this as a business? that this is not something they do to survive? How do we make sure that farming and producing and being a producer is not something people do to survive? That's something people do because they cherish it, because it's part of their livelihoods, because it's the place they earn their incomes. So if you can have conversations today that help empower these producers, you would have served you would have done hugely for this food system summit. So I want to conclude on 3 things to help you understand how I'm looking at it in terms of really catalyzing a conversation as we go into this. 1, let's be candid about some of these conversations we must have. I know Tia Diego likes saying, and being candid when it comes to talking about producers. Let's be candid around what needs to change, around what each of us can do. Are there things that producers can do that we will bring on the table and say, you know what, these are things we can do, but are there things that we all can do to support producers better? I just talked about a living wage. Are there things we can do to support producers better? As governments, as private sector, as many of us institutions that have that capability to do that. But also, are there things we must stop doing to ensure that producers can be able to deliver on what they do well? So as we go into this meeting, I really want to encourage us to think about that. We are coming to the pre-summit in July, and I believe every institution, every person, every group of people that wants to come to the pre-summit with their heads straight up have to do those 3 things. We have to be very clear, first of all, around what we are bringing to the pre-summit. And I want producers to come strong and with their heads high around what they are bringing to the pre-summit, because they represent so much for us. We just don't give it value. But I also want them to be very clear, put their foot down around what they need from the rest of us to be able to deliver the work they do. And I want them also to be very clear around what our world cannot handle. From where they are sitting, what do they need us to do, to stop doing, so that they can have a better farming environment? If we can do that, we'll be moving closer to delivering on SDGs, which is the very reason we are here, but also to creating a conducive farming environment and producing environment where our producers will thrive rather than survive. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I'm going to sit around and listen to the first few presentations, because I enjoyed listening to the presentations last week. And I will also, I'm sure I'm looking forward to the presentations this week. Martin will take you through the updates of the summit. I just wanted to tell you what my expectation of these meetings are going to be, and to really nudge you towards bringing producers to the summit with their heads high and with clarity of what they want from all of us and what they represent for all of us. So thank you again, Ismail.
Thank you very much, Agnes, for those wonderful, inspiring opening remarks. I mean, it's very clear. The invitation for the producers to the producers is very clear. Let's be candid about issues. Let's discuss them openly, and also let's come to the pre-summit with key messages, actionable messages, and also let's come to the summit with our heads held high. And to kick off the discussions, again, taking advantage of the presence of Agnes before she leaves, we have a very strong panel of presenters representing farmers' organizations. And we are going to start with my dear sister, Elizabeth, who is the president of the Pan-African Farmers Organization, to which all regional farmers organizations such as SACAO belong. She's also the president of the East African Farmers Federation. She also serves in the advisory panel of the UN Food System Summit, amongst other things, but she is also an accomplished entrepreneur, a farmer from Uganda. The list goes on and on. Elizabeth, please come forward and address us on the issues that you think are pertinent within the framework of the discussions that we're having today. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Ismail, for giving me the opportunity to speak at today's Producers Fabric Forum. And I'm extremely happy to ECU, Dr. Agnes Kalibata. And thanks again for your passionate talk and the leadership to the Food Systems Summit. Again, I would like to appreciate other participants for joining us. As we all know, that farmers are the backbone of any food system. Without them, the system collapses. We know that they play an integral role in sustaining the food system. It is therefore imperative that farmers adapt to sustainable food production approaches. We can talk of, for example, the agroecological farming. Farmers need to adapt to climate change and be resilient. We've recently seen changes in weather patterns, the outbreak of pests and diseases. So what can we do right? Can we have farmers have access to tolerant varieties, for example? Can we have them access quick maturing varieties? They need to adopt to use of technologies where possible and where applicable. But these technologies are affordable to the farmers. We need to see farmers incentivized to produce and provide sufficient and nutritious foods. Everyone is telling us to grow organic foods, for example. But what are the incentives? Are they giving us the right prices? Can we have fair trade premiums? Can we build the right partnerships with other important ecosystem actors? Can we ensure that farmers have access to the nation, and do they have the requisite capacity? And just give you an update on engaging in summit process. In terms of representation, I would appreciate summit leadership that we've been allowed to serve in different cities. Producer organizations are represented advice committee. Personally, I see represent for and the voice of African farmers. We have other colleagues under Champion Network.
We seem to be having connectivity problems, or is it on my side only?
I think it's a technical issue right now where we cannot.
It has a problem.
Okay, maybe since we don't know how long that will take to resolve, we'll probably bring her in during the question and answer session. I see she's joining in now. I'll give it a few seconds. Otherwise, I will have to call on my former board chair, Dr. Elizabeth.
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, please, you have just a couple of more minutes to finish your presentation. Thank you for coming back.
Yes, can I proceed? Yeah,
unfortunately,
sorry, with the connection.
Unfortunately, Elizabeth, we'll come back to you during the question and answer session. Please do bear with us. I want to call upon the next presenter, who is Dr. Theo Diaga, who is currently the president of the World Farmers Organization, the global umbrella of producer organizations. Theo is the previous chair of my organization, SACAO, and after that he became also the chair of the Pan-African Farmers Organization. He's an accomplished farmer himself, and someone who has belonged to organized agriculture since a long time ago. Theo, without much ado, may I request you to please give your 3 to 4 minute address. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. Dear colleagues, dear partners, the Food System Summit could not have come at a better time. There are a number of things terribly wrong in our food systems, and we have a very limited space of time to fix that. The mere fact that nearly 900 million people goes hungry, the mere fact that many of them are producers, as Agnes pointed out, the mere fact that close to 40% of what we produce on our farms never get to the consumer's plate or are being wasted from the consumer's plate in food loss and waste. The mere fact that there is more than enough food in the world, but the food is not where the people are hungry, does not get there. And the imbalances in risk and reward in our food systems tells you that we need some urgent fixing. And apart from that, the footprint of agriculture on Mother Nature, the impact on climate and the impact on biodiversity needs a serious discussion. Given that within our lifetimes, in the next 2-3 decades, we will need to feed 2 billion more people from the very same planet, from the very same water resources, from the very same soils, tells you that we need to put our heads together and come up with a better plan than the one we have now. We need a better business model for agriculture globally. Now, if we stand back for a moment and look at our food systems from the outside as if we are not part of it, as if we are mere spectators, and we would ask ourselves, what can we do better? We must acknowledge that we basically need to produce more on less and with less. Any solution that do not lead us to that is not a sustainable solution. We need to produce more on less and with less. And I do not have the slightest idea how to do that in the way we are farming now, with the farmers we have now. But what really gives me hope that this is achievable is a young generation of farmers across the globe who are stepping into the spaces forcefully with new ideas. That convinced me that our first challenge is to recruit the best human capital into this industry. We owe it to the future to go and recruit the smartest young minds to choose agriculture as a career. Because there is no one size fits all. There's no silver bullets or switches you can flick on just to change our production systems and our distribution systems. To do that, we also need a solid partnership with both consumers and scientists. We are only producing as farmers because there are consumers who would buy the stuff we produce. And the scientists must hold our hand on our way there. Those solutions which are not science-based, history will spit them out. The solutions of today must still be valid in 20 years and 50 years and 100 years from now. And lastly, there is no other constituency in the world who can do more in a shorter space of time to save this planet than the world's farmers can. Each of us is a custodian on a small portion of this planet. And if each one of us just commit to pass that piece of the planet over to the next generation in a better condition than what we found it from the previous generation. We are already more than halfway to the solid solutions. Thank you, Ishmael.
Thank you, Theo, for those powerful words. We need to leave the planet in better shape than what we found it in for the future generation. Quite interesting parting remark. Let me move on to Sophie Ryan, who is representing the fisheries community. Sophie is the CEO of the Global Salmon Initiative, which aims to diversify industry-wide, to drive rather industry-wide change at speed and scale, which are fundamental areas on the food systems sort of processes. And she will talk to us about that within the next 3 to 4 minutes. Over to you, Sophie.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased to be joining these important discussions. I'm here today to encourage producers from the seafood community to help ensure blue foods, a critical component of the food system, are adequately integrated into the game-changing solutions being put forward by the Food Systems Summit. As many of you will be aware, blue foods already play a crucial role in our food system. They provide essential nutrition for 3 billion people worldwide, provide animal protein with the lowest carbon footprint, and support the livelihoods of more than 800 million people. Blue foods will play an even more important role as we seek to build a food system which is inclusive, healthy, sustainable, and resilient. Yet why, given the important role of blue foods, are they underrepresented in the summit dialogues and game-changing solutions so far? I'm afraid to say it's because as an industry, we're not participating and engaging at the levels we should be. We need to speak up and more effectively demonstrate the role of blue foods, and more importantly, show how as an industry, we have the experience, resources, and ambition to support the much necessary food system transformation. Yes, as a sector, we face challenges: overfishing, food loss, environmental impact, and many more. But this cannot be a barrier to our engagement. There are solutions to these challenges, and we need to take a seat at the table to work through what these solutions are. It is through the multi-stakeholder engagement in the summit we can learn from one another and work collectively towards solutions for the future, and the important role blue foods will play in it. Having worked in the aquaculture space for the last 8 years, I've been hugely impressed by the industry's acknowledgement of its challenges and its drive to innovate and improve. We now need to build on this momentum to drive further change at speed and at scale, and producers and the private sector are well positioned to lead this change. There are already many initiatives across the space and the value chain to drive greater transparency, traceability, and the assurances of certification, many of which are more developed than many other sectors. Within the Global Salmon Initiative, we've seen firsthand the power of working collaboratively in order to identify problems, innovate, and then scale up the solutions. We need to highlight this leadership and help it improve and inform further improvements across the wider food system. I'm really pleased to say there is no shortage of opportunities for those of us in the industry to have a say in the summit, from participating in forums like this to attending or even hosting food systems dialogues or joining the conversation in the online community. There are countless ways you can share your perspectives and ideas. And as you've heard already today, the organizers want to hear from producers across the food system, and it's essential that they do. The recent report from the Ocean Panel released last December said the ocean had the potential to provide 6 times more sustainable seafood by 2050. This is a huge opportunity to improve access to healthy and sustainable food around the world. This will only be achievable with action from producers. So let's work together now to figure out how we make this possible. Seafood touches on every single one of the summit's 5 action tracks and also play a central role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We cannot allow others to frame the future. We have to take action now to make this possible, and the summit is the prime opportunity to do so. So this is my call on you, the rest of my fellows in this sector, to start participating in the forum and put forward the great game-changing ideas we so need for the food system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sophie, and thank you, Elizabeth and Theo, producer representatives. We shall come back during question time to address some of the questions and issues that are being raised in the chat. and have an interesting discussion. At this point, we want to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is really talking about the action tracks. To do the opening on the action tracks is Mr. Martin Frick, who is the UNFSS, United Nations Food System Summit Deputy Special Envoy to Agnes Kalibata. Dr. Martin Frick is a Senior Director of Policy and Programming Coordination at UNFSS and former Director of Climate, Energy and Tenure Division at FAO. He previously served as the representative of the Germany to international organizations, and also, among others, he also served as the German representative for human rights, humanitarian affairs at the UN General Assembly. We are privileged and to have you address the meeting, Martin. Please go ahead and address us on the action tracks. Over to you.
Ishmael, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And as my boss just said, this is for us a listening exercise to really hear from you and get the farmer's voice in. I want to update you on our action track process, and I understand that there's a PowerPoint that we can show. Here we go. Can I have the next slide? So this is basically what we want to do with this summit. 5 points we want to get out of this summit. One would be a statement of action by the Secretary General. That's a kind of an odd word, but it basically means it is not a negotiated outcome between ambassadors and ministers. This is basically telling the world what we have heard in 1 year of engagement process and what we have heard from people like you who are getting their hands dirty, who are rolling up their sleeves, who are working on our food systems. So this dialogue is a part and parcel of forming this statement of action of the Secretary General. As you know, we are doing country-level dialogues. That's the second point. And we have now 114 countries who are organizing country-level dialogues, and we hope that these engagements with all of society really do create pathways towards 2030 that can be a national action platform with producers, with civil society, academia, everyone. That can be a new law, that can be an action plan. It will take very many different forms and flavors all over the world. The action tracks are trying to build what is number 3 here, a bold set of multi-stakeholder commitments, bringing the world together in a set of very concrete actions that help us finally achieving the SDGs where we are so far behind. For that, we need number 4, we need vibrant communities. We need practitioners who are talking to each other. Most importantly, we need people who are talking across silos, who are bringing in key issues such as renewable energy, which is so important for a sector that is energy intensive as agriculture and food packaging, transporting, cooling, and so on is. So we want to build these cross connections between the different constituencies to build a community around food systems locally and globally. And then, of course, we don't want to have only a flash in the night sky, but we want to build something that lives on, very much building on existing mechanisms, but we will be continuing, following up on the coalitions of actions, doing the Food System Summit dialogues, and so on. Can I have the next slide, please? The next one, please. So here are our 5 action tracks, and the 5 action tracks are globally in charge of listening to, and I can say that in the meantime, more than 2,000 submissions that we have received on ideas, on all sorts of ways that we can transform our food systems. And on the basis of what we hear from the world, they are focusing on actions on ensuring access to safe and nutritious food to all, to shift to sustainable consumption patterns, to boost nature positive production, to advance livelihoods, and I think that's a key topic for today also, and to build resilience against shocks and stresses. Next slide, please. So this is at a glance what we have been doing so far. We had a first wave of submissions, which we cut by mid-February, where we have received more than 1,200 ideas. And they came from everyone. They came from sovereign nation states, they came from producer organizations, from indigenous peoples, from academia, from all walks of global society. So we have looked at these submissions with a lens of, do they help to realize the Sustainable Development Goals? Are they supporting farmers? Are they working for the world's poorest? And I was happy that Theo before me emphasized that so many of the hungry people actually are food producers themselves, which is a travesty, really. We have been taken on board every proposition that is valuable and sensible. We haven't eliminated any particular approaches or ways to do things, because behind every proposition, there is a community of people who feel strongly, who do that, and they deserve to be recognized. Now, we just closed the second wave of propositions, and the numbers are still in, but I know that by now we are way above 2,000 propositions that came in, which really shows the level of engagement. And it's with some pride that the Secretariat of the Food System Summit can go back to the Secretary General and say, we were tasked to make it a people summit. We have been listening. This is what we have. Next slide, please. Now, if you consider the summit as a pyramid, the foundation, the legitimacy of this summit is really based on what people have told us. As I said, more than 2,000 ideas. In our next meeting, I will have the concrete numbers, but it's way above 2,000. Distilled into 100 big ideas that we have clustered into 15 action areas to make it manageable. And these 15 action areas are hosted by the action tracks, but the action tracks don't own them. So it's not a gain, or it's not a World Wildlife Fund issue. They are helping us bringing these different action areas to bloom. And I will talk more about that. What we need now is to rally behind action areas, to present that at the summit, and moving forward towards 2030 to really meet the SDG targets by implementing these actions. Next slide, please. And this is what it looks like. You see the 5 action tracks here, which I just briefly described. And under those, you find the different action areas. Let me put out one, for example. If we are looking at action track 3, restoring degraded ecosystems, issues such as the Great Green Wall in Sahelian Africa, for example, then of course this is building food security, because you bring land back into arable use. And this is building livelihoods at the same time. It makes the communities more resilient when you push back the desert. And not least, it's rebuilding biodiversity, and it's helping as a climate solution. So in this area alone, you will find experts from all 5 action tracks, because our mantra is that we cannot solve these problems in isolations. We need to bring it all together. We need to have the different areas of expertise, because an issue like this is not done by massive tree planting. If these trees are not supporting the farmers, you need to listen to the communities. They need to create additional income. They need to have markets for their products, and so on and so forth. So we need to embrace the complexity in those. At the bottom of this slide, you see a big horizontal box called governance and planning. And here we really want to answer what we have heard now out of many country level dialogues, the request of governments to get support in shaping food systems transformation, to really go into the how question. How do you do that? How do you work with your farmers, your indigenous, your local population, to bring it all together for systemic change? Can I have the next slide, please? So this is our timeline as we move forward. As you said, Ismail, I'm coming out of the UNFCCC process, where it took 25 years to come to a contract. We've been doing all of this in a year now, so it's going really, really fast. But you see that all of the propositions, everything that we are presenting to the world, is not only based on what the world has been telling us, but we are putting that out again to get feedback, to listen to farmers, to listen to all walks of global society, to get it right. And not least, of course, we need to get the feedback from our member states, because this will be driven by member states. Also, this is a UN summit, and we hope for implementation also on a national level. And I guess that's my presentation. The next slide, please. Yes, so this is my part from the action tracks. I will put two things in the chat box, which is our food systems community, where we can online discuss with the action tracks, where you will see the areas of action that I just described, possibilities to connect, possibilities to comment. And I will also put our social media so you can stay abreast of how this process is going forward. And with that, I give back to you. Thank you very much, Ismail.
Sorry, thanks, Martin, for providing the backdrop to the next subsession, which is really about drilling down into the action tracks. But before that, maybe we could take a couple of questions. I understand you might have to leave a bit earlier. You can take advantage of maybe the next 3-4 minutes to get questions. But I have a question already that has come to you, which is saying that regarding track 5, are the resilience steps for food systems vulnerabilities also taking into account the green risk identified by the BIS in its Green Swan report from January 2020, which highlights the fundamental role that environment and food. I'm not too clear whether the question is clear to you, but I'm reading it as it came. Perhaps there needs more for clarity, but I'll leave it to you, Martin, to take this question if you can, please.
So there was a short dropout. Could you just repeat it?
The question is regarding action track 5. Are the resilience steps for food systems vulnerabilities also taking into account the green risks identified by the BIS in the Green Swan report, which highlights the fundamental role that environment and food play?
Thank you. I think that's a good example for, and it's well spotted, because action track 5 on resilience is really by nature cross-cutting. We need to build in everything that we are doing resilience. And, while we are currently in the COVID pandemic and we see how much the pandemic is hurting us, we must not forget that climate change is a reality by today. And so many farmers in the world are exposed to extended droughts, to storms, to flooding, to all of that. So all our progress will only be valid if it's built in a resilient manner. And in interconnecting the different issues, like the desertification issue I just mentioned, the resilience lens is actually a very good enabler for systemic thinking. That in everything we do, we ask ourselves, is that really also making our food systems more resilient? And that forces us to bring these different elements together. I'd also put in the chat box a second ago the link to the food systems community, where you can also link directly to action track 5. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin, for the response. Perhaps the last question for you would be regarding the UN SDG framework in relation to agriculture and agribusinesses. In what ways can these goals, targets, indicators be linked to green finance and to reporting for climate-oriented investors, both public sector and private sector investors? How could such linkages be used in the formation of NDCs under the Paris Climate Accord? A long one, I hope you got it.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Let me start with the NDCs. We have a wonderful cooperation with the UK presidency or the upcoming COP26 in two areas. One is in the negotiations itself, where basically our National Food System Summit dialogues make the case that food systems need to be a centerpiece of nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. But in return, the UK presidency and entities such as the NDC partnerships are advising many countries how to do good NDCs. And they also say, please do include food systems in a meaningful way. And in a meaningful way means breaking it down regionally, breaking it down to sectors, talking about cold chains, for example, the exciting possibilities that you have, for example, with decentralized cold storage that can be powered by solar panels or by wind. So again, and I mentioned that in the introduction, linking it to latest developments on renewable energy, because it's giving unprecedented possibilities for farmers. And on green finance, we are working with several entities. There's the Global Benchmarking Alliance that will help us for private sector commitments to really ensure that what private sector does is a driver, an enabler for SDG accomplishment. We want also that these many SDG indicators are not getting the UN in an observer perspective only. So the UN job is not just to monitor whether we achieve the SDGs in their many indicators, but to enable this achievement of the SDGs. And this is where I think the Food System Summit is addressing a gap, because often the SDGs describe a world as we want to have it, but are not so explicit in how you get to this world. And that makes it a complicated and hard piece of work, but one that is very, very needed. But again, the indicators are very important because you only take action on what you can measure. And so we are looking with every action area that we are doing, how will this action area directly support several SDGs in a measurable way? Back to you, Ishmael.
Thank you so much, Martin, for the additional information and the clarification and providing the backdrop to the next more detailed discussions around action tracks. We have a lineup of 5 people representing, presenters rather, representing the 5 different action tracks. And we shall take them in the order of action track 1, then we'll go to 5, 4, 3, 2. To do that, we'll start with Dr. Cheryl Hendricks, who is head of Department of and Professor of Food Security, Department of Agricultural Economics, Extension and Rural Development, University of Pretoria, as well as Director of Institute for Food, Nutrition and Wellbeing, University of Pretoria. She is a food security policy expert and with extensive experience in policy analysis and program design. Her research focuses on food security and nutrition policy analysis, monitoring and evaluation of food security at the household, national, and global information system level. Over to Cheryl to talk to us about action track number 1, giving us overview of the progress, specific producer focused game changers you have identified, and action areas relevant for producers. Over to Cheryl, thanks.
Good day, and thank you, Ishmael. It's a privilege to be able to represent Action Track 1 in this forum, and to give you a glimpse as to the kind of game changers that are being developed in terms of producers. Can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So just to remind you that Action Track 1 is focused on ensuring access to safe and nutritious food for all. And this brings together three very important components in terms of nutrition, inequalities, and food safety. Three components that have never really been discussed together and are very important components as the foundation of food systems. So these are outcomes that we want to achieve, but also very complex issues on their own. Next slide, please. The action track is divided into three working groups, and these three focus areas are firstly to promote food security and to reduce hunger, secondly to improve access to nutritious foods, and thirdly to make food safe. And our action track leaders have been working hard within these. We recognize that while these might be three distinct clusters for us to work on, there's permeability in the borders between them, because you can't really separate many of these issues. They're very much interrelated and interconnected. Next slide, please. So the current three clusters that the action track are working on, along with partners from the other action tracks where these are relevant, are set out in this slide. So the first action area 1.1, so these are the 15 that Martin just explained to you. The first one relates to promoting food security and ending hunger, which we're working with action track 3, 4, and 5 on. The specific areas that relate to this fora are small-scale technology for smallholders and empowering smallholders. We also are looking at promoting the establishment of a fund to deal specifically with ending hunger. Of course, this area also includes elements around livelihoods and particularly conflict as well. Action area 2.1 relates to improving access to nutritious food. And here we have game changers on anemia, fortification of staple foods, and access to more nutritious food crops. The third area relates to food safety and includes a global network for innovation and capacity building, as well as an index for food security. Please go back, thank you. And food safety solutions. There are a number of cross-cutting elements that cut across these, including finance and innovation for SMMEs. So this is particularly to create demand further up the food system to provide a pull for the response from production. There is another element on social protection, and one that is very important, and Martin alluded to just now, on infrastructure, cold chains, and clean energy. This is a very exciting development, recognizing that particularly many of the most nutritious crops that we can boost nutrition with require cold chains to maintain them. So these are your fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, for example. And one of the particular game changers in this is promoting the establishment of community-level, communal, solar-driven collection points for these kind of products. And then across all of that is transformation pathways and data, specifically looking at helping countries to provide, to develop plans to implement these actions. Next slide, please. So this example shows you how the different game changers are brought together and gives you a little bit more detail as to what's packed into those two areas that focus specifically on smallholder farmers and empowering farmers. So you can see elements around solar-powered irrigation, improving soil health, democratizing precision agriculture. This is about using digital means to help as a two-way flow between providers of equipment and farmers. Increasing the returns to fertilizer subsidies. So how can we be smarter in our application of fertilizers? improving seed quality and improving the diversity of seeds, promoting high yield varieties and making these more available to small-scale farmers, and a very exciting area on agricultural mechanization, where we realize it's not just the invention and availability of equipment that's important, but the whole value chain of that equipment. So making sure that there is financing available, making sure there are collective ways of being able to access that. Then the empowering of farmers focuses on empowering the youth, nutrition sensitive agricultural extension, focusing on land rights, because we realize that particularly access to finance is dependent on land rights, and then the development of an index-based livestock insurance system. Across all of these, it's very important in all of the game changers to consider gender and equity and access in order to gain access to these improved technologies in particular. So that's just a brief summary. Ishmael, I think I'll leave it there and deal with any questions when you get to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing Action Track 1. We now move on to Action Track number 5 and invite Elise Buckle to please present it to us. Over to you, Elise.
Thank you so much, Ismail. I'm Elise Buckle. I'm the Director of Climate and Sustainability, and I'm advising the co-chairs of Action Track 5 on the strategy and stakeholder coordination. And I really want to thank Alison, Karen here, and also Ying Swan, and everyone who's been preparing this call. We've been working on this collaboration with the private sector to develop multi-stakeholder dialogues to build resilience in the future. So next slide, please. So why is resilience, what does resilience mean, and why is it so important today? Resilience is actually our ability as a society to adapt and respond to crises, and also to do that in a way that we're not compromising long-term sustainable development, peace, human rights, and well-being for all. This is really important right now. As you know, we are facing a planetary emergency, an interconnected crisis in terms of health with COVID-19, but also in terms of food security. There are also peace and security issues around the world right now, which is partly linked to climate change, climate impacts, and rising inequalities due to the economic crisis triggered by the COVID-19 crisis. So all of this is very much connected, and a lot of member states are very interested in the concept of resilience. They don't necessarily use this word resilience, but they're basically becoming aware that unless we invest in sustainable development, in the SDGs and basic infrastructures for food and health and hospitals and education, our societies are very vulnerable to shocks, including climate change and health impacts. So this is very timely. Next slide, please. What we want to do as an Action Track team and with the co-chairs, but also with the much broader team now of partners working with us on resilience, is one, trying to find a way of how we can catalyze a systemic transformation to strengthen the foundations for resilience and to build capacity for future resilience. The second part is very much about human resilience and empowerment, because resilience is not only about building hospitals or having infrastructures to provide food to local people. It's also about individual resilience. And the third part is about this systemic approach, looking at, in particular, the One Health approach. We know that as we've seen, the COVID-19 crisis is very much linked to biodiversity loss, deforestation, and also if we want to ensure a sustainable food production, we need to restore our soils, for example, and we need to protect forests and biodiversity. The fourth one is on participation, co-creation, and governance. This is also true for women empowerment, youth empowerment, local governance, really looking at a way that people can be part of this change, of this transformation, and people and governance are very central to resilience. Next slide, please. So we have identified 3 action areas, and these are very important because we also want to catalyze partnership building around these action areas. So if you're interested in contributing to one of them, please get in touch with us. We see the UN Food System Summit that's being championed by Martin Frick here as a springboard for implementation for some of these game-changing solutions that have been clustered around these action areas. The first one is on food systems resilience, and that's also where we look at the nexus between water, food, and energy, and also the connection between short-term humanitarian action and longer-term development. Risk reduction is also very, very important. So we're working with the UN Office for Disaster Reduction, for example, on how we can build resilience to face climate change, extreme weather events, but also conflict and other shocks. The second one is around universal food access. So the vision there is that food should be a common good. We should all have access to food. And I was listening to Agnes Kalibata at the start. Especially right now, there are so many people who can't feed themselves, and including small farmers who are producing food and can't actually feed their families. So this is really, really important for us as one of the key action areas. Also looking at health and education, for example, school feeding is also important to build resilience in communities, to make sure that, young children actually get the food they need for longer term development. The third one is on climate resilient development pathways. This is very close to my heart because I come from the climate community. So this is what we discussed a bit at the start, the fact that in particular, the most vulnerable countries, the countries that are impacted by climate change, are very interested in developing climate resilient pathways. Yesterday, we had an open forum with the ambassadors of Bangladesh and Fiji, and this is really a top priority for them because they are affected by sea level rise and by potential drought and flood that are impacted their food security. There is a very strong link now that's been established between the co-chairs of Action Track 5 and the COP26 climate champions. We also want to be the bridge between the UN Food System Summit and COP26 because we feel that there is space for improvement in the NDCs, in the nationally determined contribution that countries have to submit and review this year for the Paris Agreement. And we are really hoping that food systems resilience and also climate feedback loops will be taken into consideration for the new NDCs. Next one, please. So under these 3 action areas or these 3 pillars, we have many, many game-changing solutions which have been grouped as well. And we have now identified leaders, experts, and also institutions and countries to take these partnership forward to build coalitions around these topics of humanitarian development, peace, integrated approach to food systems resilience, risk reduction. For the second one, local production for local consumption, how you build more of a circular economy for resilient supply chains at the local level, but the link also between global and national supply chains. And the third one on climate adaptation and resilience. And as I said before, also the link to international frameworks, including COP26, but also the CBD COP in China. That's very important as nature really underpins food production. Next one, please. So I will finish on a positive note that I would say that the resilience track was maybe slow to start, but now there is really a growing movement, a growing interest for this topic, and we've been really submerged by so many solutions that have been submitted to the Action Track 5 team, with now more than 257 solutions. We have a great diversity in terms of stakeholders that have been participating, civil society, member states, private sector, research, academia, farmers as well. and also in terms of geographical representation. So we are very encouraged. It's a lot of work now for all of our team, our experts, Jose Luis and Maria Cristina, to go through all these solutions. But we are very hopeful, and we think that this is showing that that all these seeds have been planted for future resilience. And also with the dialogues that David Nabarro has been supporting, there have been so many dialogues around the world. We've heard that in more than 100 countries where the dialogues have been convened, resilience is really a top priority for many of these countries. And we really believe that by championing these multi-stakeholder dialogues, bringing together member states, UN, private sector, civil society, all of them, farmers as well, youth, women, indigenous people, by having all these voices, all these very diverse voices, all these people together, we can really work on this systemic transformation for food systems. So this is really our hope for the future. And next slide, please. I will try to be fast. I know time is counted. So thank you for your attention. I also wanted to, I will finish on an invitation for all of you. We are working on a multi-stakeholder dialogue on resilient supply chains on June 11th. And this is going to be by invitation only. And we want to have a very representative subset of stakeholders from governments, from the UN, from private sector, from civil society, to work in particular on deforestation-free supply chains and climate resilient supply chains, taking some examples from the cocoa industry and the coffee production sides. So if you're interested, please get in touch with us. I'm working on that together with Robin, Alison, and others who are here on this call. And we want to make this happen in a way that's a bit more interactive and inclusive. So please get in touch. Thank you so much and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Elise, for the presentation. We are actually running behind time and want to move on to the next presenters very quickly. And please, if we could stick to within the 4 minutes allocated, that would help us considerably. May I call upon Yuan Ekanov, sorry to probably I haven't pronounced your name correctly, correct me there. You are the Senior Director, Food and Water Systems at CARE International. Please, over to you. And if we could stick within the 3-4 minutes allocated.
Thank you so much, Ismail, and thank you to each and every of you for joining us today. So Action Track 4 is focused on advancing equitable livelihoods, contributing to the elimination of poverty, promoting productive employment, decent work, and addressing inequitable access to resources. So in that sense, our meeting with you, with the producers' organizations, is crucial for us because central to advancing equitable livelihoods in food systems, and hence central to the work of Action Track 4 are the hundreds of millions of small-scale producers, including farmers, including pastoralists, livestock breeders, fisher folks, and let me emphasize that the hundreds of millions of wage agricultural workers and other producers in food systems. Next slide, please. So we have provisionally clustered the solutions in 3 action areas. And the first cluster brings together the solutions focusing on rebalancing agency within food systems. So the logic here is that for advancing equitable livelihoods, food systems must meet the needs and build the agency of the producers. And some of the solutions in this cluster are specifically addressing gender-based discrimination towards women producers and workers via the systematic integration of gender transformative approaches, because when applied to food systems, the potential of positive change through gender transformation, it's truly unparalleled. And some of the solutions discussed so far are also focused on promoting social dialogue mechanisms and enhancing collective bargaining and negotiation, including cooperatives, producers associations, etc., as platforms for giving producers and workers a voice on social and on economic development. Also, unequal land distribution by small-scale producers undermines their productive contribution to sustainable food systems. So securing land tenure rights, as already mentioned by Action Track 1, is also one of the solutions that we are addressing. Next slide, please. So eliminating worker exploitation and ensuring decent work in food systems is the second action area that we are focusing on. And there are various game changers or solutions proposed so far, and I will not have the time to describe them all, so let me emphasize a couple of them. Promoting living income and wages in value chains for producers and workers, or living income, as Agnes Kalibata already mentioned in her initial remarks, is key. Because to enjoy sustainable livelihoods, producers need to earn sufficient income for a decent standard of living so they can afford health diets, so they can send their children to school, so they can invest in their farms at the end of the day. And another one I would like to highlight is eliminating child labor in agriculture while addressing the competitiveness issue, because children often are used as traditional free labor, allowing producers in agriculture to remain competitive. Next slide, please. And finally, there is a whole set of proposed solutions focused on localizing food systems. And let me focus on one, which is Global Trust Fund, a global trust fund to provide demand-driven matching funds for initial capital or quick investments for cooperatives and for other producer groups who are seeking for investments to grow, to expand productivity and quality. And why this is so important? Because as we all know, to realize the full potential of smallholder agriculture, there is a need to reduce or eliminate the constraints that limits its investment capacity. And other examples of key solutions proposed in this group include promoting community scorecards, which is a participatory community-based monitoring tool that enables citizens to assess the quality of public services, or farmer field and business schools, a learning by doing approach, which is putting farmers at the heart of learning and decision-making around new agricultural techniques. And this is, as I said, just some examples. These were just some of the solutions that we have received and processed so far for advancing equitable livelihoods of producers and workers, coming from the many dialogues, from the consultations taking place. But we are here today to listen, to get your ideas, and to work with you to make sure that the summit will bring the real change in the lives of producers globally, and will be the People Summit that we are all looking for. So thank you so much, and I'm sorry if I really tried to summarize it as much as possible, but I was just trying to be on time. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for the presentation. We will take questions on it if there are issues to be clarified. I now want to quickly move on to action track number 3 and invite Lei Ann, who is the soil system scientist within the CGIAR. Over to you, Lei.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, I'm Lee Winowicki, and I'm joining you from Kenya. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to share a brief update on Action Track 3. Next slide. Yep, next slide. You can go. Many of you have participated in our previous public forum, or perhaps even submitted ideas for game-changing solutions. And if you go back just one slide, and some of you may be new to Action Track 3, therefore just allow me to quickly recap what we aim to achieve and what we are focused on delivering. So our goal is to boost nature positive production at scale to meet the fundamental human right to healthy and nutritious food within the planetary boundaries. We've also provided the definition, because I know these terms, nature positive production, is new to some of us, but I really want to focus today on that it's based on stewardship of the environment, of biodiversity, of the foundation of the critical ecosystem services. And as Martin highlighted, there's 15 action areas across the action tracks. And within Action Track 3, it's around protect, manage, restore resilient land, river, seascapes for human, animal, and environmental health. And as you can see at the bottom, we've highlighted the number of relevant SDGs that this action track contributes to and helps deliver on. And I think that addresses one of the questions brought up in the Q&A. In the next slide, we provide more details on these 3 action areas. So around protecting natural ecosystems from new deforestation and conversion, around managing sustainably existing food production systems for the benefit of people and nature. And as Martin generously highlighted, the restoration of degraded ecosystems and rehabilitating soil function for sustainable food production. I'd just like to point out that I think all the action tracks really acknowledge that there's no one size fits all of these solutions. And we need to embrace the variety of these approaches and also kind of combining the scientific, traditional, and indigenous knowledge to enable farmers and fishers to design appropriate nature positive solutions for their context. In the next slide, we've tried to summarize some of the 1,200 game-changing solutions that have been registered in our under now Action Track 3. And we've received 346 solutions directly from the public survey, from farmer fora, from member states, and UN agencies and leadership team. And as Martin highlighted, it's really important that we, try to embrace the complexity of these solutions. And I want to remind you that key criteria were around for a game-changing solution is the impact at scale, that they're actionable, and that they're sustainable beyond 2030, and that these game-changing solutions seek to promote systemic behavior change tailored to specific contexts. So for example, you can see under protect, the game-changing solutions around trade or deforestation, and around manage, you can see some highlights around livestock, and we've all heard a lot about agroecology, regenerative agriculture. And under restore, these clusters, remember, these are the clusters of these 384 game-changing solutions around grasslands and savanna. And I think we heard Theo also mention the need for scientific evidence to make sure that these game-changing solutions that will be implemented on the ground are sustainable. So we have a key element around monitoring and the use of data for decision-making. And of course, you heard I'm a soil scientist, the Soils Hub around bringing these game-changing solutions together for building resilient and healthy soils. And that includes carbon sequestration, which is very relevant for climate change mitigation, adaptation, and even the mention of the NDCs. So with that, I think I've stayed within my 4 minutes. Thank you so much. I look forward to trying to answer any of the questions in the next session. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Lei. And yes, we'll take questions during the discussion time. Let me quickly move to the last presenter, my dear colleague, AJ, who is also the chair of a farmers forum in India, and is one of UNFSS Champions Network. You deliver on action track number 2. Over to AJ, and also taking into account that we have maximum 3 or so minutes to deliver.
Thank you, Ishmael. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Great to be here for the 3rd Producers Public Forum and discuss and seek inputs for Action Track 2, which is shift to sustainable and healthy consumption patterns. We can move to the next slide. Why are consumption patterns important? On one end, farmers grow what consumers demand or what government incentivizes. And on the other, what consumers eat leads to health issues for the people, for the planet. It's like a one health issue for everyone. Guided by best scientific evidence, best practices, and real world examples, Action Track 2 aims to generate new ideas, support existing ideas and propositions that can catalyze shifts to better consumption. as a transition towards diets which are healthier, safer, and more nature positive, for food systems which are economically equitable. And this cannot be achieved by any one bullet point sort of a solution. It needs a package of solutions, package of practices, package of incentives. In the first phase, we received ideas and we started off with 3 broad streams. And this is the overview of the wave wave 1 propositions, which is food environment, food demand, and food waste. I will move on quickly and explain the other parts because we're running out of time. So we can move on to the next session, next slide, where what we did in the next stage is we integrated propositions across various action tracks that we had received into action areas. For action track 2, we have 2 action areas, which one is enabling, inspiring, and motivating people to enjoy healthy, sustainable options. The other being slashing food loss and waste and transiting to a circular economy. So next slide, please. In action area 2.1, I will run through the points very quickly. It's like formal and informal education strategies. We need to inculcate and incorporate education on food systems into and show its interconnectedness to health, to climate, and biodiversity. We even find that media coverage of impact of food systems onto the climate, onto our health is very low. We need to increase that. We need to look at healthy diets, incentivizing more plant-based diets to make a just transition to scientifically proven healthy diets. For that, we need food-based dietary guidelines. And those guidelines are required not only for people to make easier choices, but even for governments to design policies around it. Equally, something that's widely acknowledged is something like school feeding programs and breastfeeding. These are things that we need to incentivize. They're already existing. How do you upscale them? How do you scale them up many times is the question. For example, only 42.2% of infants under 6 months are exclusively breastfed. Yet, if we have optimum breastfeeding, we can save over 800,000 children's lives a year. These are the problems that Action Track 2 solutions will be trying to propagate to solve. Labeling is very important. Unhealthy diets are among the top leading causes of disease, death, undernutrition, obesity, and climate change. But very few people know that food impact on environment. And that's why front of pack labeling is important policy for countries to help consumers make healthier choices. Food markets, because most of the population now is living in cities and will be moving there. I personally find food environment a very important game-changing idea, because food environment would basically mean transforming power dynamics that shape food demand, creating accountability mechanisms and checks that empower governments and civil society to drive change and reward good corporate behavior. And that's something also that I think so Peter has mentioned in the chat. And how do you make systems equitable for those at the bottom? A food value chain is only as strong as the weakest link, and that weakest link is the worker on the farmer, and that's where everything should be leading to. Physical policy measures, which includes when you look at unhealthy diets which are not good, high in processed foods and beverages that are high in fat, sugar, salt, have become cheaper and more widely available, contributing to unhealthy choices. Now, extensive evidence and modeling suggests that taxation on unhealthy food and drinks will bring about positive dietary change. So these are things on the table, they are being discussed, and we look for your ideas to take these forward. So I will quickly move on and say that we also need a standard framework for assessing food systems at national levels. Governments do not have it. Till we are not able to assess, we will not know where we are and how to go forward and reach our 2030 goals. The last point would be action area 2.2, which is globally 1/3 of the food is lost or wasted between the farm and the fork. This amounts to 1/4 of the world's freshwater use, and 8% of global greenhouse gases get added to this. Now, this is very important, I think. So how do you reduce food loss? And that is why we are propagating a solution, Food is Never Waste, where 150 countries commit to reducing food waste by half of food waste by 2030 and transiting to a circular food economy. And lastly, and not the least, is to activate the activists. How do you empower a global network of activists to drive culturally relevant behavior change among citizens that lead to or engage closely with local governments? I think this is the future. Thank you so much. I'm here for your questions. I'll be answering them on chat also. I will put my email address in case somebody wants to reach out to Action Track 2 directly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, AJ, for that quick presentation. And we now want to move on quickly to a moderated discussion, although it might not take as much time as we wished before because you're running behind time. I'll first check the questions that have come to me through the other channel that we're using. And I'm also aware of the fact that some of the questions that have been used, that have been raised during the chat function are actually being addressed there. But there's a question that I don't seem to see to have been addressed. That is a question for Theo, which is why, Theo, to you, why is producing more from less a better and more reliable strategy for achieving future food security than transforming the whole system to one that wastes less and makes best use of what we can produce within planetary boundaries? If I can repeat if you wish, but
it's because we must accept that poverty is one of the main drivers of climate damaging agricultural practices. Much of what we see in deforestation, in the depletion of our soil resources, comes from poverty-driven agriculture. Instead of producing more tonnage per hectare, we need more hectares to continue with low yield harvests, and just in order to make a living and make ends meet. So if we could upgrade the current paradigm of smallholder farming, especially in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, where farming as a business becomes profitable and sustain livelihoods of families, it would mean that we need to produce the kind of yields which can sustain families and take volumes to the market. If we focus only on the reduction of food loss and waste, which of course needs to be reduced, the farmer is pretty much delivered to the rest of the value chain, because that's where the loss and the waste occurs, mostly after it leaves the farm gate and directly after the farm gate, even in terms of how we storage the product after we've harvested it. We must start with a strategy where farmers can have a handle on the problem and do something about it themselves. We can raise awareness. We can surely ensure that there's more consciousness about the depth and the width of the problem. But we must, as farmers, start with something which we can do for ourselves. And that starts with producing more on less and with less.
Thank you, Theo. And I suppose it's not the two are not mutually exclusive. It will be and. So thanks for that answer. There's a question that is addressed to Sophie. How can we overcome the problem of toxic residues in the blue food system when nearly all of the chemical products used by the society find their way into our oceans, where they are accumulated into all the products upon which the human food chain? Over to you for a quick answer, Sophie. I don't seem to get Sophie on the line. That question will be addressed perhaps when she's available or online. I'll move on to maybe Elizabeth. We did not give you a chance to complete your message. You only had 1 minute left for you, and you said you could use it very usefully. Could you come in? Are you ready?
Yeah, thank you, Ismail. I will keep my video muted to have a good connection. And this really shows some of the challenges that farmers face in, engaging in such dialogues. So I really wanted to express what we see as opportunities for producer organizations in such kind of dialogues and the UN Food System Summit. So recognizing the important role that farmers play in the Food Systems Summit, I think for us, the UNFSS provide us a platform and an opportunity, especially for smallholder farmers to be heard and their pride to be considered. It is, again, very important to note that our contribution to health, safe and nutritious food is never, and I'll repeat that, it is never captured in data, because the bulk of what we produce is not in the trade domain and the rest falls in informal sector. I want everyone to ask themselves a question. If the system collapsed, like our health system has collapsed today due to COVID-19, and we have a spike in food-related illnesses, where would the majority of incidences be? What would be the strain on our health services? And what do we observe today? In most of the current dialogues that are happening now in preparation for the Food Systems Summit, we are still propagating the current and known state of play. We are not addressing the farmer's plight. The conversations have not pitched past the trader, past the banker, past the transporter, and the government officials. And I think this is where producer organizations' independent dialogues will play a key role. I'm happy that the Secretariat is providing some resources for us to do that. And then I want this summit also to be an opportunity for farmers to quantify our contribution for sustainable food production, for land, for water, and for nature conservation through our improved, sustainable, and good agriculture practices. Does anyone have an estimate of what farmers contribute? I mean, in monetary terms. We might need an expert, probably, or the scientific group to help us in calculating our contribution. And we hope this will attract the attention of everyone to give the farmers and producers the attention they deserve and the right incentives for sustainable food systems. Lastly, as we speak today, farmers world over are today closing down their enterprises. Look at the dairy, the poultry, the fishing, sugarcane, rice, mention it. And why? The food system has been hijacked by the oligopolistic players who have been for quite some time consolidating their businesses and have slowly locked out farmers from the market through introduction of policies, regulations that are out of our reach. And this is why these discussions are very important. I will just end by calling all the producers through our producer organizations to engage in the summit processes at all levels and present successful cases of our game-changing solutions for consideration. Sustainable food systems are a shared responsibility, and if you can't do it for yourself, at least do it for the future generation. Thank you, and over to you, Ismail.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that powerful message. I see there's a lot of questions that have come through the other channel we're using, but in the interest of time, let's move on to the next discussion. And if we create more space, we'll take other questions and answers towards the end. The next discussion, really, presentation is around the food systems dialogues and updates around that. And to address us on that is Dr. David Nabarro. It's an honor and privilege to be able to call upon David, who in some way has been part of my mentor in the past, who is the co-director of the Institute of Global Health and Innovation at Imperial College London. And among others, he's been a special envoy on WHO, Director General on COVID-19, and has got more than 30 years experience in public health, nutrition, development at country, regional, global levels, and has held several positions in non-governmental organizations, universities, national governments, and the UN system. David, always a pleasure. Please, if you could come forward and address us, please. Thank you.
Ismail,
over to you.
Very, very many greetings to you personally. On my screen, I can see two other amazing leaders, Teo de Jager and Ajay Virjaka. Wonderful, and actually a massive privilege to be with you, but also with so many colleagues who are representing very large numbers of producers from around the world. I'm going to give you, hello Teo, thanks for the wave. I'm going to offer just an update brief on the Dialogues program, which is part of the preparation for the summit. And as I do so, I want to send a message to all of you. Thank you for bringing producers into the national, independent, and global food systems summit dialogues. And let's do more. As was just said by Elizabeth so clearly, let's try to find ways to get even more producer involvement in the dialogues, because this is a fabulous opportunity for the producer voice to be there, for producers to be present, and for the producer mindset to be really percolating through, not just into the summit, but after the summit. So our starting point, Ishmael, is as follows. Food systems are being encouraged to shift, but there are so many stakeholders involved in food systems, and they are so locally specific that simply telling people they've got to do things differently, either because the science says so or because a community of international experts say so, that's not enough. What we need, I think, as a community to do is to create an environment where the multiplicity of stakeholders are able to actually explore some of the challenges as a group and work out how best to make the shifts in ways that are aligned to the values and goals of the Sustainable Development Agenda, with its focus on sustainability, equity, and resilience. So that's the chapeau. And it's a pretty good one because it aligns, I believe, with the interests of people, of the planet, and it addresses some of the challenges that are being faced everywhere in rural spaces. Of course, COVID is both reminding us of just how urgent it is to sort out the challenges in food systems. As was implied by Teo, COVID is making people poorer everywhere, and it's doing it super rapidly. And in a way, because we're right in the midst of this COVID pandemic, we probably don't fully grasp just what damage it is doing to people's lives, to the fabric of our societies, and indeed to long-term nutritional prospects of hundreds of millions of people. So I think we should hold on to the idea that the COVID impact is potentially enormous and multi-year. And so in our dialogues, as we look at the future of food, just really be made super impatient for urgent action because of what COVID has shown us of the frailties of our systems. So I'm aware that as time is super tight, the summit has established a program that encourages a focus on pathways to sustainable, equitable, and resilient food systems by 2030, and then the actions that need to be worked through now, and the possibility of building coalitions around those actions for the coming decade. And that invitation has been issued everywhere to all governments, to multiple stakeholders, and to global processes. All the time saying, look at food from the widest possible perspective. and work out what we need to do to get on the 10-year journey. And the action tracks are incredibly helpful as these dialogues are being planned, because they're offering a framework for thinking. But in the end, the dialogues are for the national governments or for the organizing entities to do it for themselves. There's an invitation, there's a proposed methodology, but essentially you do the dialogues. And provided you can fill in the feedback forms that's on the dialogues website, we undertake to incorporate the outcomes of your dialogues properly into the preparatory process for the summit. Of course, having said that, we've given ourselves quite a big task. Let me just give you the update. 113 national governments have nominated conveners for their Food Systems Summit dialogue process. We expect 130 by the time of the summit. That is the vast majority of countries in the world. It's just about 2/3. That was way, way more interest than we expected. But it's more than that. The conveners, as we talk to them, have really taken on board the need to look at food from a very wide angle. The conveners have been encouraged and continue to be encouraged to involve a full range of producers, whether they are farmers of the land or fishers of freshwater or seawater, or they're guardians of the forest or keepers of livestock, to bring them in, and to bring them in right through the dialogue process. So they're there for the initiation stage, they're there involved in the exploration stage, and they're involved in the consolidation when the effort is made to develop pathways. It's happening super fast. We only started the dialogues process in December, and this sudden arrival of 113 conveners and the initiation of dialogues in even more than 113 countries, because there are some countries that are doing dialogues without conveners. This is happening, and it's happening now. And the dialogues are coming thick and fast. I can't tell you exactly how many national dialogues are going to take place in May, but there is at least 2, perhaps 3 happening each day all over the world. Now, it's difficult to get full inclusion in the national dialogues because of COVID, but the numbers are still extraordinary. In Thailand, just had a dialogue with more than 200 people present around the country, with a lot of producers involved, and they are managing through all sorts of improvisation to find ways to get inclusion despite this pandemic. And what I've been doing is just keeping an eye open to just check that it's not just a few token producers involved in the dialogues, but there are producers involved in large number in the dialogues, so that they're there in all the discussion groups, so that they're there in the wider conversation about the future. So we're trying to make that happen. In the end, it's the convener who decides the participation in a national dialogue. And that means that as I look at all of you, I say, please do what you can to check in with your national dialogue conveners. You can find out the details on the Summit Dialogues website. Do what you can to check in with them and just offer to be part of the program, because many of them are wondering how to make sure that they get enough producer representation in their dialogues. Secondly, the independent dialogues. 312 have been announced. We're anticipating several thousand will take place by the time of the summit. Many of them involve producers. Quite a lot of them, I can't give you the number yet, are led by producers. This is vital. The independent dialogues are a way to be seen and heard. They're an opportunity, as Elizabeth said, to be taken. And there's a very exciting trend emerging which is of links between national dialogue conveners and independent dialogue conveners. I thought it was just in a few countries, but the more conveners I talk to, the more I am hearing that they really enjoy linking up with independent dialogue conveners, even when they don't necessarily come out with positions that are identical to that of the government, because there is a recognition that diversity is not a bad thing, that it needs to be welcomed and embraced in the dialogue process. So please keep going. Please organize as many as possible. We originally thought there would be 1,000 by the time of the summit. There'll be more. And for me, I want to encourage farmers to be initiating and convening dialogues as much as possible, and wherever possible with unusual co-conveners, farmers and consumers, farmers environmentalists, farmers and retailers. That these unusual relationships are worth doing. And we've heard that when the dialogues happen, even with people and groups who normally really don't like each other, in the dialogue format, the conversations can at least happen. And whether you're in Europe or the US or in Asia or in Africa or in Latin America, they're trying to find ways of bringing together the interests of producers, the interests of consumers, as well as the interests of those who have other roles in and around the food system, is surely a valuable thing to do. So moving to my end remarks. I think we have a chance like never before. I'm talking to you straight about this. I've never known this level of engagement of multiple stakeholders in any international process. And I've certainly never seen it like this in food. And so please, if you can, find ways to engage in national dialogues, find the time and energy to just put yourself forward and become a convener of independent dialogues. Look for unusual partnerships and do dialogues with people you would not normally sit down with. Use video means if you possibly can. Don't put yourself at risk of COVID. It's so serious all over the world at the moment. But it's almost because of COVID that we've realized we've got to do better. Because of COVID, we've realized that there's no sensible thinking about the future of food without the producers at the table. And because of the opportunity of the summit, I'm saying not just producers at the table, but producers setting out what is possible and being part of the solution. That's what you are. Thanks a lot. Stay in touch. Do get in touch anytime if you think I can be helpful. I'll put my email address in the chat.
Thank you very much, David, for the update and for underscoring the importance of dialogues and for putting the producers at the center. Just in case you're going to leave a little bit earlier, we only have 12 minutes left. I want to pose one question that has come through another channel here. It's coming from the producers, obviously. The question is, the process of farmers organizing themselves in dialogues can be time consuming, as we are a very diverse group, as you well know. How does this work with the Summit Action Track processes and timelines? I can also add my personal reflection on that, since we discussed it in the producer group a couple of days ago, that we seem to be running behind time and it might not be possible for us to catch up with the first pre-summit deadlines. Does it mean that we won't be taken in because you're running late, but running late for good reasons because we started late, but also we have a very diverse constituency and we want to come up with more harmonized positions? Over to you.
Ishmael, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to give you my personal view. I I encourage you all to also follow up with the Secretariat as and when you have contact with them. And I see Secretariat colleagues are here. So what I'm saying now may well be contested by others, but here's my image. I mean, the action tracks are producing their propositions, and they've produced propositions based on a first wave of solicitation, but they've got another wave of solicitation underway. And so we must not expect the action track process to be finalized at all soon. And as I see it, they are constantly evolving with their presentation of action areas. And that's great, because the dialogues are increasingly producing their own issues, their own pathways, their own ideas for major decisions that are going to be made, and their own thinking about areas for action and coalitions. And I think that the ideas coming from dialogues are going to increase between now, not just and the pre-summit, but also right up to the summit. And that's fine, because the time when the major statements are made is the summit. Of course, the pre-summit is an opportunity to align the ideas coming from the action tracks and the ideas coming from the dialogues, and to bring them together. And the dialogues will produce perspectives that will help shape what's coming from the action tracks. The action tracks are producing propositions that is already influencing the framing of the dialogues. It's very, very interesting to see how strong that is. But there's some distance to go, because the action track work will not be finished until it's been fully fertilized by what comes through from the countries. And that will be coming through more and more between now and August, or between now and September. So as far as I'm concerned, Ishmael, nobody should feel they're too late. Everybody should be conscious that now is the time to be converging, exploring, consolidating, and getting ideas through. But there's plenty of time for things to be further adjusted. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, it feels like we're at the beginning of a very intense process of exploration and consolidation. Does that help you, Ishmael?
Very much so. It gives us, of course, hope, subject to, of course, the timetables and processes from the Secretariat. But I get a sense that you don't want to leave anyone behind. If time can allow it, we go for it.
Very important message in the chat, Ishmael, from Alison. And I think it's important that if you don't mind, one of us should read it out, or Alison should be given the floor. It's very, very important.
Let's hear it from the horse's mouth. Alison, are you there? Or would you rather I read it?
No,
hi.
Hi, Ishmael. No, I mean, just really in terms of what David said, absolutely, completely agree. And you're beautifully captured, Ishmael. We want to leave no one behind here. You know, we're doing everything we can to also help with the dialogues, particularly with you know, producers, farmers, fishers, herders, and so on. And David's right. The key moment really is a summit, and of course, we want to build momentum to go on beyond the summit as well. So completely agree with that sentiment, David. Thank you very much for raising it, and thank you for the question. Thank you. Over.
Thanks, Alison, for that response. And here we have it, the producers. Let's move as fast as we can, respect deadlines as well, but there's flexibility in case we run into problems. Once more, David, thank you so much. There aren't any more questions that I can see flowing in. All the best, and thanks for the very clear explanation.
Yeah. Well, and big respect to everyone on this Zoom. I would really like to say big respect to everyone in this room, but we're not really in the room, but we are at least gathered together. And these 3 producer forums, for me, have been really instrumental in helping me reframe my own thinking and work even harder to make sure that the range of producers participates in the national dialogues, not just 1 or 2, inverted commas, representative producers. And it's that notion of making sure the range is there that I really want to work on. And so, inspired by you, I now have to go off to the next thing, but I hope that you're all okay. And I'm okay if you send me an email. I don't always reply exactly on time, but it's important that we can be in touch with each other. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you. Colleagues, we have exactly 4 minutes before we close, and there are just a couple of questions that perhaps we can accommodate before we wrap up that I've received through the channel that we're using, that is relating to the action tracks that were presented earlier on. There's a question, action, nature and science-based solutions might be more beneficial for the landowners and small farmers in developing countries like Georgia. It was more specific as opposed to the presenter. The other question, perhaps, that I could also say now so that we can have maybe a quick response from both, is on action track number 4. There is phenomenon of wage-dependent farmers. Due to insufficient income, part of the year, farmers work on their own farms. Another part of the year, they become employees working on someone else's farm or another rural job. That's the end of the question. I'm not sure whether the 2 action track leaders could be able to reflect and answer quickly. We have 2 minutes left for that. Over to action track number 3.
Yes, so in 30 seconds, it is important that we link and integrate scientific evidence, traditional knowledge, local knowledge, so that we're really developing and implementing and scaling solutions fit for the context, for his or her farm, for the type of soil that exists there, for the governance structures and land tenure that exists there. And then it's important then that we use tracking of the impact of these interventions so that we know what works where and for whom and how they're benefiting. Over to the next action track.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, sorry. Juan here from Action Track 4. On the question on wage agricultural workers and the other sources of income, that's phenomenally important. And definitely that is something that many of the solutions are focusing on. Small scale producers or producers in general, they are not only producers, they are citizens. They have different sources of income. They are part of the rural population, right? So we have to be mindful of that. And also when we talk about producers, it's not only about agricultural producers or primary producers, also others along the value chain. You know, those in the processing, in the agro industry, they are also producers. They are contributing to producing food. So we really need to look into that with that ample lens. Over.
Thank you so much. 1 minute to go, and I just want to wind up by thanking all the presenters and all the participants for an excellent engagement. Time is not always on our side, but quite a bit of information, even for me, who I think I'm familiar with the terrain. I actually got a lot of learning to do. I mean, the message really out there is that let's go out in all our numbers as producer organizations, as producer representatives, as farmers, and assert ourselves in the negotiation processes. If you are not on the table, if you are not on the train, it will move without us. And it's our obligation to really come in and assert ourselves in the process. It's not always that we win, but at least we negotiate better deals that are fair, equitable, and transparent, open, and that we are also account ourselves to each other. Once more, thanks very much, and the background team, the support, and over to everyone. Cheers, have a great day, have a great evening, a great morning, till we meet again. Bye.
Food is more than just what we eat. The ways in which we produce, process, and consume food touches every aspect of life on this planet. It is the foundation of our cultures, our economies, and our relationship with the natural world, and has the power to bring us together as families, communities, and nations.
Families and children are on the brink of famine.
But today's food systems are fragile and unequal. When they fail, there are ripple effects around the world, and the pandemic has impacted the most vulnerable among us. But we know what we need to do to get back on track. We have an opportunity to build back stronger than ever. Transforming our food systems is possible and necessary, and we can set a course to make real change for the benefit of all people. By bringing together key players from around the world and giving voice to citizens in every country. Because a strong food system means
no matter your race, no matter your class, no matter where you live,
Women and men have equal opportunities to produce and access nutritious food,
which promotes human health at every step
without degrading land and water resources.
Significa una agricultura familiar.
Provide us, the community, with stability.
All year round, every month, every day of the week.
Even during a pandemic.
we are all connected, and we all have a responsibility to act. We must be bold. We must think and act differently. Transforming our food systems is the most powerful action we can take to solve our biggest problems. Because together,
we can build a just and resilient world.
A just and resilient world
where no one is left behind.
where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind.
Where no one is left behind. Join us today